Hello everyone, Saramansuki here in its 3D goodness, and yep, you have read the title. Look, I am very mixed on how to do this essentially, but I'll tell you what, let's just do it. So yeah, today I'm reviewing Final Fantasy XVI, the latest main entry in a long-running RPG series. Compared to other Final Fantasy games, it is being sold as a solo action RPG and is a PS5 exclusive too. Does this latest adventure bring us the fantasies of our wishes, or does it need to be the final fantasy? Let's find out. So this review is going to be tricky, because this game has no issues but a lot of odd things came up. And for disclaimer stuff, this is going to be very spoiler light. And I'll be showing footage from the first 5-ish hours, the boss fight with Titan, and very briefly with Odin to help explain my points. Right then, let's go! Final Fantasy XVI, which I'll just shorten to FF16, is based in the brand new world of Valistia, where two continents, Ash and Storm, house mother crystals, giant shiny stones of crystal that are seen as the blessing of the world, like wealth and power. People use crystal shards for magic, but more for general life, like fire on a stove, wind to blow clothes, that kind of thing. But there are some people who use magic without them, called bearers, but are labelled branded as well, and treated as slaves, heck, lower than slaves. Some branded can even become dominants, allowing them to sort of become and use the power of icons. Basically, the Final Fantasy monsters, yet Aeon's Eidolons, all that pizzazz. You play as Clive, a shield made to protect Joshua, his young brother, the Prince of a Nation, and the dominant of the Phoenix. After a short time in the childhood arc, the icon Ifrit causes great havoc, Joshua is murdered, and Clive heads out to avenge him. Years pass, and now labels are branded. Clive saves another dominant to come into contact with the Cid of this world. Running gag, there is a Cid in every main Final Fantasy game. Cid is a man who protects those, branded or not, giving them freedom and fair work. And Clive goes there, and after some wibbly-wobbly, decides to stay and help Cid in his mission. Without going further ado, that's pretty much the core premise. Clive trying to save his fellow branded from the cruelty of the world. One point comes to destroy the mother crystals, as without them there's no magic and everyone's forced to live equally, that kind of thing. Excuse me. I'll say up front right now, the voice acting and performances might be the best I've heard, or one of the best, definitely top 3. The voice acting overall is stupendous and damn fantastic in both acting and general performance. Cid is an absolute delight. Gav might be my favourite side character in all of gaming existence. Joshua is pretty good, and whoever does Clive needs a bloody Oscar. It's been a while where the voice sold me, but where the voice perfectly fitted the character and his gestures. He got all the behaviours down from anger, control fury, sadness, and complete meltdowns. He nearly had me crying at a couple points. But where the actual story of the game is concerned, well, this bit will be spoiler free, so if I had to be blunt, I don't even remember half of it. Not to say the story's bad, there's a lot that happens that doesn't really impact Clive or the game all that much. Through the story, you are shown like background scenes of the rulers and officials from the kingdoms in the game, which was fine at first, showing drama, death, etc. of the kingdoms and nations and how they're getting on. But barely any of the story in the background you see influences the plot of the world you navigate revolving around Clive. Most of the drama that happens has nothing to do with Clive or even the general game I played. Characters literally argue and die with no consequence to the player at all. The characters are hindered, pressured, or even conflicted with anything, maybe minus 1 or 2 exceptions I guess. And the only literal character who we could have interacted with, which I won't spoil for drama's sake, does all the drama backstage, and then as soon as Clive meets this person, they leave. Literally within 5 minutes, they leave. As for Clive's story, nothing really truly happens. There's no character arcs, no one learns anything, and minus Clive and Gav, everyone just feels kinda there. Even the main air-quote MC female in Jill, who Clive saves early in the game, just feels there. She has one moment of character, does it, and that's it. Clive does go through some obstacles when taming his powers, but nothing really develops. He just becomes able to use the power. Doesn't really do much beyond that. Another thing is the whole bearer branded thing. In the beginning of the game, it does really show the harshness of the world, how the bearer/brandeds are treated, perhaps a little too much. But after a certain point, they're kind of in the background. It's almost like they just fade away. There's also not really a true antagonist to push the story forward. The actual antagonist, which I won't spoil again, doesn't really do anything villainous. And the only person who threatens you, which I might as well call the second antagonist, threatens you twice, and then buggers off. No joke, again, I won't spoil it, just buggers off. The story lacks the drive that encourages players to continue, not like a mission to improve or a world to, well, I guess a world to save, but somebody to go on. There's no motivation, and it lacks the character arcs as well to truly invest in the characters. And since most of the story is background, you kind of wonder why you even need to pay attention. Well, I did. If the story had more interactive with Clive, gave him reasons or obstacles, it'd be better, because frankly, all I'm going to remember is Clive and Jill, Gav, Sid, the final boss, Odin, Clive's mom, and maybe Bahamut, and that's it. It's just weird. Like I said, the characters are really good, but they don't really have much for growth. Final Fantasy XVI is a lot more of a kinetic adventure than most other Final Fantasy games, with quick combat and small-ish maps you just warp to from a grand map. The maps themselves are kind of just there as a means to get set dressing done, not much more than that, so we're moving on. Combat itself is a rapid affair of slashes, magic, combos, and powers, akin to games such as Devil May Cry or Bayonetta. Through the game you control Clive only, that's just it, just Clive. You do have your dog companion Toggle with you most of the game, and you can guide him, but everyone else who joins your team is AI controlled completely, with no need to kick them out. When I say guide, like attack, defend, heal, there you go. Clive can slash with his blade, use magic bullets for chip damage, dodge, and use 2 skills and the passive of the icon element he has equipped. In the beginning he only has the Phoenix, but will gain several more for the course of the game. When using the Phoenix, he can dash long distances, cast fire magics, and use fire-based skills, and later he gains Garuda, grabbing enemies from afar, that being its passive, slashing with wing claws as part of his skills, and casting said wind, and so on. Like Bayonetta, to some extent, Clive can dodge for sort of negate damage and strike with like a counterblow, or parry in this game, which when he strikes as the enemy does, to slow down time and strike back harder. As time progresses in the game, Clive, as I said before, will gain access to several icon abilities, of which he can equip any 3 to mix and match their skills. All skills have a cooldown, but separate from one another. So say I have the Phoenix and I've burnt both skills on that one, I switch to Garuda and use its skills, so that way I can keep mixing and matching kind of thing. Each icon element, save for the first one Fire, has 4 skills and 1 passive. The passive being unique to each element, like I said, the Phoenix can dash, Garuda can grab, and later on you gain an element that allows you to guard, stuff like that. You have 2 skills already, but you have 2 more somewhat to unlock, and each skill can be upgraded, then mastered, which costs you AP points you gain from combat. Mastering skills means you can use that skill on an entirely different element, but mastering the skills is very expensive though, as a price for the mix and matching. General enemies in combat will pose no challenge, as you juggle fire, wind, and so on. The only times they were ever a pain is when they were buffed to not stagger or flinch. Bosses are a different story. Bosses don't flinch, period, and first must be staggered by dropping the gauge down, which is easier to do with skills. Once staggered, you pile on the damage, which increases the more you hurt them. Aside from combat, in terms of gameplay, there are other things you can do in side quests and monster slaying. The side quests are, for once, pretty fine. Some are good mini-stories, some of them entirely unique fights, can't really bash it. And the monster slaying, from my record, unless it's like a hidden one later on, they were just recycled bosses you played for the main campaign. Moving on. Now first, I thoroughly enjoyed it, the combat. It was quick, kinetic, and fast. But it quickly showed one of this game's most notable issues. A lack of variety in its gameplay. What I did in hour 3, in one regard, I did exactly for the next 12 hours. And in a second regard, for the entire game. For a good 12 hours, shortly after obtaining Garuda, the wind icon, you have almost the same powers with no change at all. Almost, you guess you can mix and match the skills, but you're stuck still with those two elements. When I finally got the third icon power, it finally delivered some nice change to my moveset. Same with the fourth, which was my favourite, and it injected some much needed stimulation. Against bosses though, on a mechanical level, and on the second regard I mentioned, it didn't matter what I had. You just dodge, use the best skills to stagger, go prime, which means higher damage and health regen, rinse and repeat ad nausea. And for the generic bosses especially, it was just this for the entire game. What I did notice though is that some skills annoyingly work better on generics since they flinch and can be juggled in the air, but aren't too effective on unflinching big enemies. For example, there's an ice skill later on which sends out an ice, raises it up and captures, but you can't really capture anything you can't, hit. Ignoring the big set pieces, which I'll go on a little later, enemies were either too easy or a case of dodge, attack, stagger, harm, repeat, and some big enemies were recycled annoyingly a few times. This also brings me to, back to the variety issue I mentioned before, because in this game there are only 3 enemy types. Just 3. Generics, big enemies, and bosses. That is it. Generics are easy, no challenge, they will decimate, and I'll admit were fun later on, to juggle around. Big enemies are just big slow brutes you just dodge, stagger, and towards the end, when you learn their patterns, offer no challenge. The third types are cinematic or story boss fights, which are almost entirely exclusive to one chapter for the cinematic ones, with big scenes and set pieces you won't see anywhere else. The big cinematic ones often involve icons, and they almost felt like an entirely different game in some respects. And fights that didn't involve icons were quite tricky, forcing me to defend and change my approach, utilising powers and abilities that meant if I carelessly attacked, I'd just get my ass handed to me. The third type is the third type of enemy, the stories and uniques, is the only time the game encouraged any variety, but I have 2 separate issues. The cinematic boss fights involving icons are amazing, but kind of make the most generic fights kind of dull by comparison. And the ones outside of icon fights, the unique bosses, did force you to change how you attack them, but they have their own separate issue. And it's not entirely their fault either. When fighting, a lot of the moves or skills you use are big flashy magic or screen-filling moves, which look cool, but completely obscure the enemy. Against nimble, unflinching bosses, you physically can't see when they attack, meaning you'll take damage over and over and over again. Yes, you do have super armor when using skills, but you're still taking damage that you can't see, and it just limited what I could do to even avoid it. What's even weirder is the game does sort of try to encourage variety, and I mean sort of in loosest sense. During combat there are these big words that appear for your actions, like good dodge, good hit, combo, stuff like that. But that's just it, they were just words. The game could have maybe given bonus EXP, gear, money, but nothing. Making me wonder if maybe there was a plan of a stealth system in place, like Devil May Cry, but couldn't work out to make it fair, because these big words are kind of just there. 2 odd notes for gameplay. First is, Final Fantasy XVI is sold as a solo action RPG, but minus Torgal, the little wolf companion, who I felt was absolutely fine with, Clive is joined by AI companions almost the entire game, save for certain big bosses, which you can't guide, equip, or control. For the most part, it's Jill who joins you with the power of ice, so why you can't control her, or maybe guide her, like defend, heal, cast magic, I have no idea. A second party member would immediately added more variety. The second odd note is FF16 has a crafting system, but it just feels there. You have a blacksmith who's at your hub place, giving materials to craft things. But you only control Clive, who only wields swords, that's just it, just swords and 3 accessories. That's it. And all the materials you need for the best stuff to give him, the game just gives you readily for doing normal story progression, pretty much eliminating any need I had for grinding, both in gear, heck even in leveling too. The actual gameplay though is fine, I guess, it's quick and responsive, but it gets quite dull and repetitive. For the first 15 hours you only have 2 icons and 4 skills to use. Not as in literally 4, you can only equip 2 per one. But with the staggered gauge, I just favoured the skills from the selection I had for each of the 2 icons and just hit harder over anything and even beyond that. And outside of cinematic boss fights or certain unique ones, I just fought them the exact same way. Though on a positive note, the gameplay is surprisingly accessible. There are accessories you can equip almost from the get-go, which grant an almost AI-controlled boon, like Clive auto-dodging, or item using, and magic casting, which for less experienced players is amazingly useful. Weirdly though, there is no drawback using them. You know, like lowering EXP, or no trophies, or lower rewards, stuff like that. But yeah, like veteran players can use this from the get-go. I think you can't use them on the hardest difficulty, but yeah, there's just that. Right, let's move to the graphics, because this is a lot less divisive, because this game is one hell of a graphical achievement, and might be the best looking game to physically exist on console. Dodging PC haters, or those that think, PC's the best, moving on. The graphics on this PS5 exclusive are stunning. The lighting, amazing. Sound design, spectacular. Locales, detailed. Voice acting, excellent. And the music, my heart nearly died. From the sweeping fields, the arid desert, big waterfalls, and lush forests, it's all just wonderfully crafted, and the cutscenes are well performed and acted. The mocap actors did an amazing job in their cutscenes, but let's just say all this splendor kind of presents a problem. Because the cutscenes are performed so well, you can kind of tell when they got a little lazy. Now, the cutscenes of the characters fully mocap, capturing all their little nuances and you know, physical things. But there are also cutscenes where it just looks like the head or torso animated, and then there are cutscenes where the characters just stood still and it's only their lips really moving. So it's just kind of jarring. But that's all I can really say about the graphics. Bloody good job all around. A quick note. The cinematic boss fights, as I mentioned maybe in the gameplay, are the best goddamn part of the whole game. They were incredible. I want more of them. They are big set pieces, amazing cinematography and acting in the little story segments you got, and my god, the mastery of the music. I wanted more. I didn't care, I just wanted more. They were absolutely the best part of the game, and I imagine that's where 6% of the budget even went. World and pacing, minus the greats out of the gameplay, are my biggest personal annoyances. Air quote personal. And let's start with pacing. Let's just say for this game, it is all over the place. The story itself moves along okay, I guess, but when compared to the cinematic boss fights that are rapid, epic affairs, they're going full force, never slowing down, it makes the general pace almost slow by comparison, and the story almost stops dead. The pace literally stops until the player's done like 2-3 story quests before the player can move on, and it does it several times. It almost felt like the game was loading the next story chapter and then let me on until I did 3 generic side quests. And these side quests, story-wise, were literally just talk to this person, then talk to that person, defeat this group, then got person C, then defeat group B, and that was it. That was literally it. And in one time, I was just a slog of endless generics and mid-bosses. One argument I thought maybe is that Square Enix encouraged this kind of thing to make them explore the world to solve the problem, but this ties into my second personal annoyance. I felt no immersion in this game at all. Final Fantasy XVI, Sylvestia, Ash, Storm, This is an entirely new Final Fantasy world, not seen before, and set almost like in an archaic era. They don't even have airships, the most they have are boats. They have new rules for how the world works, new countries, kingdoms, etiquette. I wanted to explore and breathe in this new place, but it didn't let me, and gave me no reason to either. For a start, you don't actually explore the world, or at least you don't feel like it. You just teleport from map to map from like a grand screen, which instantly surrenders the idea of this game being an adventure. The theme maps can be surprisingly huge, but as I mentioned before, it's literally just set dressing. There is no reason to even look around. There's no, like, unique monsters to find, there's no quest to find, there's no treasure, and maybe outside of the hunting side quest I touched on before, you have no reason to. You're literally just going to be running. That's it. You can't even interact with the NPCs for flavor text. There are only like 2 or 3 specific shopkeepers you can talk to, the story giver or specific quest givers. That is it. What's odder is that there is a lot of lore you can glance at. The game like introduces new kingdoms, the war that goes off in the background, that kind of thing, and everything about the bearers too. But a lot of information you can glean comes from short glossaries during cutscenes that let you look certain terms, which at the beginning I thought was cool, but then I thought about why couldn't the game just show me this? You know, show me a little bit about the history kind of thing. Like, I couldn't explore these kingdoms until the story let me. I couldn't learn more naturally about the people. And anytime I want to explore a new land, it was either ruined, destroyed, empty, or full of monsters. And whenever some background was given, you know, for the state of the world, it was in static cutscenes, with just somebody talking over it. I will admit the immersion is more my personal thing, but I think older Final Fantasy games have immersed me, the player, better than this game did. And so, the review is done, and I'm tired. Jeez. So, Final Fantasy XVI. I came away a little more annoyed about the game than what I enjoyed. I really did want to enjoy the game more. The story was there, the world was there, the gameplay was there. It was like they didn't quite follow through with it or mesh it enough. The voice acting is superb, the graphics are incredible, boss fights are goddamn amazing. For the music, I almost needed CPR. I felt the game got a bit better towards the end when you had more to play with, when even the mini-bosses started challenging the skills with adapting to me. Most of the gripes I have are personal, and I see some people enjoying this game a lot more than me, but I think some people will come away a little disappointed. I personally see, perhaps in a year time, an enhanced version of 16 coming out by Square Enix. Like, maybe you can control Jill and Joshua for more varied combat, give Clive more skills to use. Maybe hide treasures or quests in the world to find, or heck, give Clive entirely new elements. There are a ton of Aeons, Eidolons, beasts, whatever out there, and try and maybe bridge the story and the main game more together, and I can see this game blue. Potential is there, and I'm being brutally honest, if this game was more refined and more improved, it would be a hell of a lot better than it is. They just need to strike the iron while it's hot, so to speak. Final Fantasy XVI, exclusive to the PS5, I gave a 7 out of 10, and a low 7 at that. As I said, there's nothing bad, it's just fine. For a new, big Final Fantasy game, exclusive to a platform, it's just fine. Enjoyable to play, a bit bland and repetitive, but good for a playthrough. I feel like I'm more ranted about this game than spoke about it. But as I said, writing this review was hard. It's much easier to comment on a bad game than a dull one. You might enjoy this, you might not, it's entirely up to you. Still, I thank you for listening in. If you played any games that annoyed you, or heck, you enjoyed more than other people, tell me in the comments below. Otherwise, thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the bell, all that pizzazz. You will be doing me a big favour. Otherwise, see you later, my friends. Bye-bye.
I'll kill you. If it's the last thing I do.